When I moved into her house, I thought she was just my landlady. But the way she whispered that night changed everything. The house looked older than I expected. A two-story brick place wrapped in wild ivy, with a porch that creaked faintly whenever the wind passed. It was late afternoon when I arrived, suitcase in one hand, a folded rental agreement in the other. The autumn air carried that dry, leafy smell that always reminds me of new beginnings, and quiet uncertainties. I knocked once. The door opened almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. She stood there, poised, elegant, early 40s perhaps. Her dark hair was tied back loosely, a few strands brushing her cheeks in the breeze. Her eyes were steady, assessing me with a kind of quiet curiosity that made me straighten my posture without even thinking. She wasn't intimidating exactly, but there was a presence about her. "Hi," I said, clearing my throat. "I'm Daniel." "About the room?" Her expression softened into a welcoming smile. "Of course. Come in. I'm Elena." The warmth of the house met me the moment I stepped inside. Polished wooden floors, sunlight filtering through patterned curtains, the faint scent of jasmine perfume lingering in the hallway. She closed the door gently behind me, and for a moment, the outside world disappeared entirely. She walked ahead, heels clicking softly, and gestured for me to follow. "I hope you don't mind the age of the place. It has its creaks and quirks, but it's good to me." "It's beautiful," I said honestly. As she showed me around, the kitchen with its vintage tile backsplash, the cozy sitting room, the narrow staircase that curved upward, I found myself paying attention to the small details, the way her voice carried warmth when she spoke about the house, the grace in her movements, the calm confidence in the way she filled a room. When we reached the small office to handle the paperwork, she handed me a pen and took my ID to photocopy. Our fingers brushed briefly, a simple accidental touch, but it jolted through me unexpectedly. Her eyes flicked up, meeting mine for a split second. There was nothing overt in that look, but it lingered just a heartbeat too long, enough to make my pulse quicken. She handed the card back with a polite smile, but something about the air between us had shifted, subtly, like a change in temperature you only notice after a moment. As I signed the lease, I couldn't shake the feeling that this house, and this woman, would turn out to be far more complicated than I'd imagined. The first few days passed quietly, almost too smoothly. I unpacked my things, learned the rhythm of the old house, and tried to fall into some kind of routine. But the house had a rhythm of its own, soft, unpredictable, alive in ways modern apartments never were. Every morning, the smell of brewed coffee drifted through the hallway before I was even awake. By late afternoon, golden light would slant through the kitchen windows, landing in warm patches on the tiled floor. And at night, the place came alive with tiny sounds, the soft ticking of clocks, the faint creak of stairs, and somewhere distant, the crackling of an old radio playing quiet jazz. Elena moved through it all as if she belonged to the house and it belonged to her. She wasn't overbearing or intrusive, she gave me space, yet somehow, she was everywhere. Sometimes I'd find her pruning flowers in the garden, her sleeves rolled up, sunlight brushing over her shoulders. Other times, she'd be in the kitchen reading a book with a cup of tea, the kind of picture that makes you want to sit down and stay a while. One evening, I wandered into the kitchen to make tea for myself. She was already there, standing by the counter with the teapot in hand, as if waiting for someone. "Oh, Daniel," she said, smiling. "Perfect timing. I made extra." We sat at the small kitchen table, warm light gathering around us like a soft cocoon. She asked about my work, my reasons for moving, my family. She listened, not just with polite nods, but with that steady gaze of hers, like she was truly interested. And when she spoke about her own life, she did it in measured, thoughtful ways, letting pieces of herself unfold slowly. The more we talked, the more I noticed the little things, the curve of her smile when she teased me gently about my messy handwriting, the graceful way she gestured as she spoke, the way her laugh seemed to make the room warmer. At one point, we both reached for the teapot at the same time. My hand landed over hers. For a moment, neither of us moved. Her hand was warm, her skin smooth. She looked up, our eyes meeting, and something unspoken hung in the air, a quiet, fragile spark neither of us had intended, but neither rushed to break. I finally pulled back with a nervous chuckle. She smiled faintly, but her gaze lingered just long enough to make my chest tighten. Later that night, lying in my new room, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just politeness. Just coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. Rain arrived without warning one evening, sweeping across the neighborhood like a soft gray curtain. By the time I returned home, my jacket was damp, my hair clinging to my forehead. The house glowed faintly through the mist, its windows fogged slightly from the warmth inside. When I stepped into the kitchen, Elena was already there. She stood by the stove, carefully pouring hot water into 2 mugs, steam curling upward like delicate ribbons. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled. "Perfect timing again," she said lightly. "You look like you could use something warm." I laughed, running a hand through my wet hair. "You read my mind." She gestured toward the table. "Sit. I'll get you a towel." Moments later, she returned, gently tossing the towel at me with a playful ease I hadn't seen before. I dried my hair as she sat across from me, both of us cradling mugs between our hands. The rain drummed steadily against the windows, wrapping the room in a calm, rhythmic cocoon. Conversation started easily, small talk about the weather, work, the quirks of the house. But slowly, like a curtain being drawn back, her tone shifted. She spoke about her kids, both grown and living in different cities now. She told me how the house used to be noisy, full of footsteps and laughter, and how quiet it had become lately. "It's strange," she said softly, tracing her fingertip along the rim of her cup. "You spend so many years wishing for silence, and then, when you finally have it, it feels like the house is holding its breath." Her voice carried a gentle melancholy, the kind that doesn't demand pity, just understanding. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. And in that quiet, I realized how rarely people actually get listened to like this. She talked about the garden, about her late nights reading, about moments of doubt she never shared with anyone else. Her words were honest, unguarded, not the polished landlady I'd first met, but the real woman beneath. At one point, as she laughed softly at a memory, she reached across the table and laid her hand on my forearm. It wasn't planned, it wasn't flirtatious. It was human. Warm. Reassuring. Her fingers rested there for only a moment, but the warmth lingered long after she pulled away. And in that gentle, rain-soaked kitchen, something between us shifted again, not dramatically, but unmistakably. It wasn't attraction alone anymore. It was trust, quietly forming in the space between shared stories and soft laughter. Something changed after that rainy evening. It wasn't anything either of us said aloud, but the air between us carried a quiet, restless charge. Our daily interactions became more layered, threaded with pauses that felt heavier than before. Passing each other in the hallway, exchanging glances over breakfast, brushing past one another in the garden, each moment seemed to hold something unspoken. The house itself became part of this delicate dance. Its narrow corridors and softly lit spaces made every encounter feel intimate, even accidental. In the evenings, dim yellow light from the wall lamps cast warm shadows on the hallway walls. Sometimes we'd cross paths unexpectedly, she coming down the stairs, me heading to the kitchen, and for a heartbeat, neither of us would move. She had a habit of tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was nervous. I started noticing it more often lately, usually right after our eyes met. It wasn't obvious, but it felt revealing, like watching someone's thoughts slip through a crack in their composure. One night, I was heading upstairs after finishing some late work in my room when I nearly collided with her at the corner near the stairway. She wore a loose cardigan over a nightdress, her hair down, softer and less composed than usual. She froze for half a second, startled, then let out a breathy laugh. "I didn't see you there," she murmured. "I should have been watching where I was going," I replied quickly. We both stepped in the same direction, then again, awkwardly mirroring each other until she laughed again, quieter this time, almost shy. She reached out instinctively to steady herself, her palm pressing lightly against my chest. The contact was brief, but everything inside me seemed to still. Her hand was warm through the thin fabric of my shirt. We stood close enough that I could feel the faint rhythm of her breathing. For a single heartbeat, neither of us looked away. Then, just as quickly, she withdrew her hand, her composure returning like a practiced habit. "Good night, Daniel," she said softly, her voice steadier than her eyes. "Good night," I managed, though my pulse was anything but steady. As I climbed the stairs, I glanced back once. She was still standing there at the bottom, watching me go, not with confusion, but with a quiet, conflicted intensity. Whatever this was between us, it was no longer easy to ignore. The walls of the house seemed to hold the silence for us, heavy and waiting. The storm rolled in just after sunset. Dark clouds smothered the sky, and soon the wind began to howl softly through the trees, making the house groan like something ancient and alive. I was in my room when, without warning, the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the radio downstairs had stopped. I grabbed my phone for light and made my way down the creaking staircase toward the basement. Elena always kept a small flashlight by the kitchen sink. I remembered seeing it on my first day here. Sure enough, it was still there, tucked between a few cookbooks. I clicked it on, and a warm, focused beam cut through the dark. The house felt different without light, closer, more intimate. Shadows pooled in corners, and every sound echoed louder than usual. I made my way down the narrow basement steps, the wood groaning beneath my weight. I just crouched by the fuse box, fumbling to see which switch had tripped, when I heard footsteps behind me. "Daniel?" Her voice drifted softly through the darkness. I turned, raising the flashlight. She stood at the bottom of the stairs, wrapped in a light robe, her hair slightly tousled from the storm. The beam of light caught her face just enough to make her eyes shimmer. "Sorry," I said, smiling nervously. "I was just checking the fuse box. Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she replied, stepping closer. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold floor. I couldn't sleep with everything so dark and quiet. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" She stopped a few feet away, the flashlight between us. The rain beat steadily against the small basement window, and thunder rumbled distantly. Down here, the air felt heavier, as if the house itself was holding its breath. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked at me, not with the casual ease she usually carried, but with something softer, searching. I started to apologize again for the outage, but she stepped closer, close enough that I could see the fine lines near her eyes, the way her lips curved slightly when she wasn't trying to smile. Then, with a playful glimmer in her eyes and a whisper that seemed to hang in the darkness, she leaned in and said, "Don't worry. I like my tenants young." The words hit the air like a spark. Not crude, not mocking, something between a tease and a confession. My breath caught. The flashlight wavered slightly in my hand. She didn't look away. For a heartbeat, the storm, the darkness, the creaking house, all of it faded, leaving only the two of us and that charged, dangerous whisper. And just like that, nothing between us felt quite the same. In the days following that whisper in the basement, something subtle but undeniable shifted between us. Neither of us mentioned it directly, no jokes, no acknowledgements, but the air in the house carried that moment like a lingering scent, faint yet impossible to ignore. Our conversations became softer, more deliberate. Her eyes lingered on mine a little longer when we spoke. I found myself listening for her footsteps in the hallway, noticing when the light in her sitting room stayed on late. And at night, as I lay awake, my mind replayed that whisper again and again, not just the words, but the way she'd looked at me when she said them. One chilly evening, the power was back, the storm long gone, but the house still felt quiet, expectant. I came downstairs to find her in the sitting room, a small fire burning in the hearth. She sat curled on the sofa, wrapped in a shawl, reading by the flickering light. She looked up when I entered, a soft smile touching her lips. Couldn't sleep either. I shook my head, smiling. Not really. She patted the seat beside her. Come keep me company, then. The fire's good for insomnia. I sat down, careful to keep a polite distance, though the warmth from the fire and the faint jasmine of her perfume made the space feel intimate. At first, we talked casually, about the storm, about a book she was reading, about nothing too deep. But gradually, the conversation slid into quieter, more personal places. She stared at the fire for a moment before speaking, her voice low. You know. I haven't felt this kind of spark in a long time. I wasn't expecting it. Especially not here, not like this. I turned toward her, heart pounding. Her expression was open, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. I wasn't either, I admitted. But it's there. Whether we talk about it or not. The silence that followed was warm, heavy. She met my gaze fully then, no teasing, no guardedness. Just honesty. I don't know what made me do it, but slowly, I reached out. A loose strand of hair had fallen across her cheek, I brushed it back gently, my fingers grazing her skin. She didn't pull away. Instead, she exhaled softly, her eyes fluttering closed for just a heartbeat at the touch. When she looked at me again, there was no pretending left between us. We hadn't kissed, we hadn't said anything reckless, but something real had crossed between us, quiet and irreversible. The fire crackled softly, as if to mark the moment. After that quiet night by the fire, nothing was quite the same between us, but it didn't unravel chaotically. Instead, it unfolded gently, like the slow blooming of something that had always been there, just waiting for the right season. Days slipped into weeks, and a kind of unspoken rhythm formed between us. Our interactions weren't rushed or theatrical, they were made of soft, ordinary moments that somehow meant more than they should have. In the mornings, I'd often find her in the kitchen already, making breakfast with her sleeves pushed up, the early light pouring through the windows and catching the faint streaks of silver in her dark hair. She'd glance up at me with that knowing half-smile she'd started wearing lately, the kind that didn't need words. Coffee? She'd ask. Always, I'd reply. We'd eat together at the small table, not in silence, but in the easy kind of conversation that happens when two people simply enjoy being in each other's company. Sometimes she'd reach over absent-mindedly to adjust my collar, or brush away a crumb from my cheek, and each touch, small as it was, left its quiet mark. In the afternoons, we'd take slow walks through the garden. She'd point out which flowers were blooming late that year, or which plants needed trimming. I'd listen, not because I was especially interested in gardening, but because her voice was calm and grounding, and I liked watching how her face softened when she talked about things she loved. Evenings were our quiet sanctuary. Some nights, we'd sit on the porch with tea, watching the neighborhood lights flicker on one by one. Other nights, we'd read in the sitting room, the silence between us comfortable, like a well-worn sweater. It wasn't a dramatic love story. There were no sudden declarations, no stolen midnight escapes. What grew between us was slower, steadier, rooted in trust, shared quiet, and something deeper than either of us had expected. One evening, as autumn began to turn crisp, we sat together on the porch. The sky was streaked with gold and pink, the kind of sunset that makes you pause. Without a word, she slipped her hand into mine. Her hand was warm, steady. I didn't look at her, I didn't need to. In that simple moment, surrounded by the fading light and the scent of her jasmine perfume drifting softly through the air, I understood something quietly profound. This connection hadn't been planned, but it was real. Not rushed. Not forced. Just two people who had found each other in the spaces between ordinary days. And for the first time in a long while, the house didn't feel like just a place I rented. It felt like home. If you enjoyed this slow burn age gap romance, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more heartfelt stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps these stories reach more listeners, and I'd love to hear which moment touched you the most.